So we were discussing about the interface of Microsoft Excel. So I will continue that discussion and basically cover a naming convention of files, and then when we are saving the file, details about all these files. Okay, so I'll first cover naming conventions, right? So it's very important that you name your file properly so that you understand that what file is for what, right? I have experienced this myself when I save file as book 1, book 2 and so on, and then I realize later that I do not know and I have to open them, go through it, so on, so on, so on. We will also talk about how to manage your project, folder structure, different kinds of documentation as well when we are going to talk about the projects, right? But right now this is just for understanding how to name the files, right? So you could name your files based on your projects, right? And then tasks, right? And then obviously there are other options as well, but this will give you an idea, right? So for example, you're working on a sales dashboard or analysis, right? And this sales is not your general sales. It is either for a business unit, which is a smaller part of the company, or it is for a specific team, right? So basically, let's say um, you are working on sales for malls, right? So you could start with the business name, which is malls, right? Then underscore or hyphen, right? Then we can say sales, right? And then we could give either date, okay, or some other identifier basically, okay, just to make it easier. And then we'll have to give it a version, right? So whenever you're working on a file, okay, there are different kinds of files. So one could be your main file or your working file. The other one could be your dataset. The other one could be your reference file from where you get the information, right? So for datasets you could say ds or data, right? For reference file you could say ref, right? But for main files or working files you could say wf or working, right? And then give it a version name, right? Generally datasets and reference files do not change a lot, right? So versioning them, like if you want to do it, it's a good thing to do, but generally they do not change a lot, but your working file change a lot, right? And what happens is in projects you go back and forth, like this is something that we need, this is something that we don't need, like change it, delete it, update it, all those things, right? So versioning is very important so that you can go back to your previous version, working version, and can start from a previous timeline. And so it could be v1, v2, and when you know for sure that your work has been accepted, it is the final work that you're going to do on this project, unless there is a change that comes like very late, okay, it becomes final, right? You don't say final, you don't say finalize, new final or something. It has to be very clean. You don't say final unless it is actually finalized, like you get a go ahead from your stakeholders, from the person who actually demanded or gave you that project, right? So this is about the naming convention, right? Now let's talk about saving files. So we talked about some of the important files that we have in Excel. One is the main file, which is XLSX. We also talked about XLS, but generally it's not being used anymore unless you are working in a company which uses a lot of legacy system, which is very rare nowadays, so I'll not cover that for now. XLSM, which is for macro enabled workbooks, then binary workbooks, CSV and TSV. CSV and TSV are basically similar in terms of what I'm going to tell you, but they are using different delimiters. A delimiter is something that separates two different values in a row of data, right? So my book, okay, so right now I have a workbook where I have some dummy data. It's just same column till from 1 to 1000 repeated multiple times. So I'm simply going to save it, right? And I'm going to save it as data, right? Let me follow naming convention, right? So Excel, right, for data analytics, right? So I have the major heading, which is the Excel, right? And then this is for what? This is for data analytics, right? And then this is for what? This is for lecture 2, right? And then I have data, let's say save example, correct? The extension is XLSX. Let me save it for now, okay? And I go to the folder where it is saved. If you would see, it is 42 KB. Now this is not something special, right? You would do it very often, right? The special thing would be that if I go ahead and save it as XLSB and then save it, right, in the same folder, same name, if you look at it, XLSX took 42 kilobytes of data. However, the binary format took 35 KB, right? So this is to show that binary workbook actually take less amount of disk size when you're saving it, right? So this is the main difference when I talk about binary and the normal workbook, right? I'll talk about XLSM at the end, so let me just redesign. Okay, CSV, comma separated values. So let me just note it down. And TSV is basically tab separated values. Okay, so I go back to this, right? Let me rename these also. Normal, binary. Okay, now I will save this as CSV. So I save it, I go here. So now I'll delete this one, okay? Example, okay, and let's see, this is taking a bit more than the normal workbook, right? So you have to basically think about all these things when you're saving the workbook. This will not become a problem if you're working on a relatively smaller data set, 5, 10, 50 MBs, for that matter 100 MBs. As soon as you go above 100 MBs, it majorly depends on your system configuration. Okay, so now I have the CSV or comma separated values file. Now what is the difference, like why do I save it like this? So there are majorly two reasons for it. So let me take this file and just open it here, okay, on my text editor. So if you see, everything is comma separated. So Excel knows that if you're saving the file in the CSV extension, you have to separate the values by comma, and it reads it accordingly. So you basically see this data here, okay, as normal data that you would see in Excel, but in the backend it is actually it actually looks like this, right? The reason for using CSV instead of Excel is if you don't want to save anything other than the data, right? If you have pivot tables, if you have tables, if you have functions, if you have formulas, you don't save the file as CSV file, because all those functions will be gone when you save the file as CSV file. So that's reason number one, right? Only saving the data. Reason number two is when you go to Excel, at the very bottom you would see that there are 104856 number of rows. If you want to save anything after this, there is no chance that you can do it in Excel. you will have to use either a different sheet or use two different workbooks, something like that. But in CSV you don't have that limit. You can basically go unlimited, but in order to open CSV with that amount of rows, you will have to use something other than Excel as well, because Excel will open that file, yes, but it will only show you till this. After that it will basically truncate the data. You will not be able to work on it, you will not be able to see it. Right, so let me go back to the original editor. Okay, and let me go back here, and Excel file uh, has been opened in the CSV format. I cannot save it in tab format or TSV. And so what I found is you have to actually open the XLSX file, the normal one, and you basically go ahead and save that file as TSV. So I go to tab delimited data. So the extension here is txt, which is fine, but what you're looking at is tab delimited data. And when I save it and say yes, you would see that the file has been saved. Right? So if I open this now, you would see this. Right? So all the data that you see here is basically delimited by tab. Now let's talk about the XLSM format, so which is macro enabled workbook, right? So this is a sample workbook, and if you look at it, I have the developer tab. I go to Visual Basic, and I have created a very basic function. It takes a number as an input, it doubles it and gives the output. Okay, so we will be talking about VBA very briefly in the final lectures of this series of videos, but let me show you what it does. So if I close it, doubly 12.5, and it gives me 25 as the output. So I go back to Visual Basic, and you can basically see this is how it looks like, right? So now because I have a macro or VBA code inside my Excel, I cannot actually save it as a normal file. I'll have to save it as a macro enabled workbook. Okay, so I'll go here. If I don't save it as the macro enabled workbook, basically the code will be gone, so you will lose the code. Okay, so I save it, I can then close it, and I can go back here. Okay, I have not followed the naming convention, but it's fine for this exercise. So now this warning that you see on the screen basically is a safety feature from Excel. So in VBA macros or simply macros, there are features that can be triggered based on some events. So if you open a workbook, the code can run and can basically delete some files or do anything which is unintentional or not desired by the user. So make sure that whenever you open an XLSM file or a macro enabled workbook, if it is not from the trusted sources, probably disable the macros after opening the workbook. If you know that the source is actually trusted and you know that there will be no harmful code in the file, then you can basically enable it.